This Saturday, July 29th, MLB Betting Picks edition of the MLB Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by our Patreon. Score exclusive perks and content available only to our patrons at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. Welcome, everyone, to the MLB Gambling Podcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is Friday, July 28th, currently 5:03 on the East Coast. Here to go through our lock, dog, and total picks for the Saturday games. We'll also touch on some trades that have gone down over the past 24 to 48 hours in the MLB. And joining me here to help me break it down, you guys know him as the voice of the Tennis Gambling Podcast, WNBA, NBA, NFL, and of course here on the MLB Gambling Podcast. It's Scott Studio Reichel. Scott, how you feeling this afternoon, my man?
Doing pretty well. Pretty busy morning, but looking forward to breaking down the Saturday games.
Yeah, pretty interesting week thus far. I know some of these division races are heating up, and then we're on the cusp of the sorry, I said NBA because we did NBA show earlier this morning. MLB trade deadline. I think the deadline is on the 1st, but we also have already had some trades that have gone down. Like I mentioned, we'll touch on those in the latter part of the episode. One team in particular that's pretty much blowing it up, at least in their pitching rotation, has been the Chicago White Sox. Dodgers making some moves, Astros made some moves as well. So we'll touch on all of it as these teams look to strengthen their, I guess, lack thereof bullpens, and then trying to make that run for another World Series title are the Dodgers and the Astros. But we'll touch on that, like I mentioned, at the end of in the second half of the show. On this episode. So you guys know how we do it usually here on these Saturday episodes. We'll go through our lock, dog, and total picks for the Saturday games. And let's just kick it right off. Let's start out with our totals here, Scott. You want to lead us off with your total pick for the Saturday games?
Sure. So my pick for the total, I'm going to go to actually a team total in a matchup between the Angels and the Blue Jays. I'm going to fade Manoah. I'm going to go with the Angels' first 5 team total over. I'm assuming it's going to be 2.5, might be plus money. It's either going to be a very heavily juiced 1.5 or a pretty decent plus price at 2.5. I'm going to take it either way. Manoah had one good start against the Tigers since coming back. Since then, he's been pretty, I'd say, mediocre, like he was pretty much before. Well, he was terrible beforehand. Now he's been okay, I guess. But he's still giving up roughly 3 earned. And I do think that when you're looking at the Angels offense based on recent form, I think they can do enough to actually get to Manoah relatively early and often. Couple home runs, etc. But for me, a team total of 2.5 in the first 5 against Manoah, I'm just going to fade him. It potentially could be plus money. Give me the Angels to get it done, assuming that Ohtani's back isn't seriously injured and assuming he's in the lineup. But I do think, once again, you're looking at a pretty good deal there.
Yeah, I know Ohtani is in the lineup on Friday night, so not a huge concern for the Angels. And, we touched on the Angels yesterday as well, that they made their decision of obviously not to trade Ohtani and try to make a playoff push. Whether they can do that or not, I know they're only 3 games back in the AL wild card spot, but yeah, I mean, no argument for me. I know Alek Manoah came back, like you mentioned, against the Tigers. That's a great spot for him to come back. Only allowed 1 earned run, but since then gave up 4 to the Padres in 3 innings. Gave up 2 in the first 5 to the Mariners before they tacked on 1 in the top of the 6th. But this Angels offense, I think more so, Scott, has been hitting the ball well and been able to score runs. I know we saw them score at least 6 runs in the 3 matchups against Tigers earlier this week. I know that they haven't played the toughest competition. I know they've had a game against the Pirates in there. But don't look now, man. This Angels team has won games. They swept the Yankees. They got 2 out of 3 from the Pirates, and they took 3 straight from the Tigers. This is going to be a big series for this team, for the Toronto Blue Jays, if they do want to make that playoff push, because the Blue Jays are in front of them. But as far as the game goes, yeah, no argument for me about Manoah and him giving up runs. In Rogers Center this season, he is 0-5, or should I say Rogers Stadium, 0-5 with a 9.00 ERA. 31 innings pitched. He's allowed 31 earned runs, 30 walks at home thus far this season. I think the hot bats could continue here and should continue for the Angels against Alek Manoah. All right, for my total pick, I'm going to go over to that last game of the night on Saturday night. It's a game between the Cincinnati Reds and the LA Dodgers, and that number is currently sitting at 10 in this game. I'm going to go with the over. There are some 9.5s out there with the juice on the over on -125, -127. But I am comfortable with still taking this 10. I think this should go over the total and fly over the total. I know one of Scott's favorite fades of the season, Luke Weaver, is on the mound here for the Reds on the season 2-2 with a 7.20 ERA. He has 65 strikeouts to 26 walks, but last 5 games, 5 starts, 1-0 with an 8.24 ERA. He's allowed 18 earned runs in 19 2/3 innings pitched. Did face the Dodgers earlier this season where he allowed 7 earned runs in 3 2/3 innings pitched to that in that game. And over his last 5 games, I know the Reds have been able to win, but they've really also provided him the run support in those games. They've scored at least 10 runs in 4 out of the last 5 matchups, or sorry, for the last 5 starts that Luke Weaver has made. And then on the other side, you take a look at Emma Shaheen. He got off to a pretty good start for the LA Dodgers, but has regressed since then. 3-1 record with a 6.75 ERA. Over his last 5 games, an ERA of 8.49. He's coming off a game where he allowed 8 earned runs to the Texas Rangers, and the walks are also a concern for Shaheen. He's allowed at least 3 walks in 3 straight starts, and his last 4 games, we've seen a final score of 14-3, 9-7, 6-4, and 8-4 loss to the Rangers. So I think the bats are going to be alive and well in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if we are at the cusp of around 7-8 runs within those first 5 innings. So we're going to take the first 5 innings and maybe fade both pitchers. I don't hate that either, but I'll go with the full game over 10 and just fade both of these pitchers here, Scott.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of either pitcher either. Sheen's record's been good, but you're looking at the overall numbers, and both pitchers have ERAs that are north of 6.7, which is not a good sign. I could see runs in this game. And if you want to actually look at the head-to-head meetings earlier this season, 2 of the first 3 meetings had at least 14 runs. So I can definitely see both offenses kind of just exploding here. You might only need one offense to explode. You might end up getting like an 8-4 type game and you still win. So I don't hate it. You're looking at Weaver and the Dodgers' young starter, who is also not very good. I also agree with you on the over.
All right, before we get over to our dog picks for the Saturday games, let me tell everyone about the Sports Gambling Podcast Patreon. Do your part in the war against corporate gambling and sign up for the SGP Patreon. Ton of exclusive content, contests, and merch just for our patrons, plus a monthly SGP Stories podcast and an ad-free, uncensored show highlighting the best stories from decades of being degens. There's even a Discord channel just for our patrons. The Sports Gambling Podcast Patreon is a great way to score exclusive perks and support SGPN. To get all the details, just go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. Again, that's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. All right, Scott, take us over to your dog pick for the Saturday games. What do you got for the people?
All right, so for my dog pick on this one, I'm actually going to go with a decent plus price. I'm going to go with the Rangers on the money line at plus 152. I understand that Perez has not been great lately, and I'm aware that Darvish has really not been great all year long. He's been better a little bit lately, but he did get shelled his last outing against Pittsburgh. But simply put, you have issues with both starting pitchers. We know Texas' lineup is a lot better, and we know that Soto's been linked to trade rumors every day for the past week.
Yep.
San Diego's not really looking to buy at the deadline, and I am wondering when they might officially pull the trigger on blowing the team up, so we'll see. But plus 152, once again, for the much better team, I don't think makes any sense. And I get the argument might be Perez isn't that great. Neither is Darvish. Sorry to break it to you, but Darvish has not had a good year either, and you're giving me the much better offense at plus 152. I think it's a great price. I really just don't understand why the Padres are getting so much respect when they've underachieved the entire year. Even if Perez doesn't pitch well, the lineup can still bail him out. So I do think that you're looking at getting a very good value play with one of the better offenses, if not the best offense in the league. Yeah. I think it's a great price. I'll take the Rangers money line at plus 152.
Yeah, it's something similar that we talked about on the Friday podcast. That the
Except
Rangers,
Darvish is worse than Musgrove.
Yeah, and now you're almost getting a similar or even a better price here on the Texas Rangers, and maybe it is something that's priced in with Martin Perez hasn't been very good this season. But again, I think in the locker room, just for the Padres' sake, that Juan's, like you mentioned, Juan Soto's name has been in rumors for the past week, maybe linked to your Yankees. That might be a destination for him, but I think we agree that this Padres team has well underachieved this season, especially with all the offseason moves that they've made over not only this past offseason, but over the course of the last 2 years. And it's just been a disappointment. But um, even though Perez has been bad on the road with a 4-2 record, they've still won 4 of his last 5 starts. I know 4 of those came at home. But Darvish is, I think you're right. He's just fade material. I know he's been relatively a good pitcher at home over the last several years, but it hasn't been the case for him this year. 2-4 with a 4.73 ERA. The Padres have lost 3 of his last 5 starts as well, including his last 2 home starts as well. And the Padres have allowed 7 runs in the game against the Mets, and then they gave up 8 to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And that was probably Darvish's worst start of the season, where he allowed 7 earned runs. He gave up 4 home runs in that game. And like you mentioned, Scott, now you have a Rangers offense that is, in my opinion, the best offense in the league, that has a lot of power. They can hit for average, can score runs. Yeah, this is a great price here on the Rangers. So I definitely agree with you on this. All right, for my dog play, I'm going to take the other Texas team. I'm going to go with the Houston Astros -1.5, currently +135 on the run line. They're hosting the Tampa Bay Rays this weekend. And this one for me is more of a fade of Taj Bradley and what he's been, or I guess not been doing, and that's not been pitching well for the Tampa Bay Rays, especially over the course of the last 5 games. Last 5 games, 0-3 with an 8.46 ERA. He's allowed 21 earned runs in 22 1/3 innings pitched. Did face the Astros earlier this season. He did get the victory, but he did allow 3 earned runs in 5 innings pitched, and he allowed 2 home runs. He allowed total 4 hits, and 2 of them were home runs he gave up to the Astros. Astros also did get back Yordan Alvarez and Jose Altuve. I know they came back in that blowout loss against the Rangers, but having a game and another game on Friday night under their belt, trying to get that rust off, I think that's only going to be in the advantage of the Houston Astros here. And you take a look at what the Rays have done in his last 5 starts for Taj Bradley. They've lost each of those 5 starts by him, and 4 of those 5 losses have come by at least 2 earned runs. Now, I know Hunter Brown hasn't been very good over the last 5 games either, but he does have really good history against his Rays lineup. You take a look last season, earlier this year, 7 shutout innings. He only allowed 2 hits, 8 strikeouts. And that was a time of the season, Scott, where the Tampa Bay Rays had gotten out on fire. We talked about that this week. I know it was against lesser competition, but in his career against the Tampa Bay Rays, he's pitched 11 complete innings, and he's only allowed 5 hits, 0 earned runs. Hunter Brown has allowed. So I think this is a good bounce back spot for Hunter Brown. I definitely have the better offense. I trust Hunter Brown more at home. And again, like I mentioned, Taj Bradley not been very good over the month of July. I'm going to continue fading him. I like the plus price on the run line here. If you want to take the Astros team total over as well, I think that's a good play as well. I think it's a little correlated there. But Astros -1.5, +135 on the run line with Taj Bradley and Hunter Brown on the mound, Scott.
Yeah, I'm not a big Bradley guy. He's another one of those young, talented pitchers who hasn't really pieced it together. He's had moments, but when you're facing off against Houston at home with Yordan and Altuve back in the lineup, not to mention Tucker and Bregman and all the guys that they have, I think that he's going to get into some trouble. Brown has kind of annoyed me the last couple of starts, though. He hasn't been as good as I thought he potentially would be, but
Yeah.
he's good enough to get it done, and Tampa can't hit at the moment.
Yeah. A couple of new faces in the chat joining us. Shout out to those guys, Ryan and Austin. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate you guys joining in the live chat. If you haven't already, do us a favor, smash that like button on the live stream. It really helps us out on our YouTube channel here. Scott, let's go over to our locks for the Saturday games. What do you got for the people?
All right, so I talked about it on the last podcast, but I'm going to run it back. I'm going to go with the Twins on the run line at -115. I mentioned on the show yesterday that the Twins have 9 wins against the Royals this season. all 9 wins have been by multiple runs. So they've tended to dominate this particular opponent. And you're looking at who's pitching in the game. You have Ober, who's pitching, who's been solid in general, and he's against Jordan Lyles. And it's not like you really need an excuse to fade Jordan Lyles, but the Twins, once again, have been solid lately, and they've been very good against the Royals all season long. I'm not going to spend much time going through stats because everybody knows the Jordan Lyles trend at this point, and the Royals have been one of the worst teams in the league all season long, especially lately. So for me, give me the Twins to continue their dominance over this bottom feeder. Give me the Twins minus 1.5 and minus 115.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue against it. You talked about Jordan Lyles. He's been better at home, but it just hasn't translated to wins for the Kansas City Royals. And let's just say even Jordan Lyles comes out and pitches a decent game within those first 5-6 innings. You still have one of the worst bullpens that you're going up against in the Kansas City Royals. And you just take a look at Lyles' numbers against the Twins this season. 2 starts, 0-2 with a 7.71 ERA. He's allowed 8 earned runs in 9 1/3 innings pitched, 6 walks and 6 strikeouts. So it just hasn't been very good for Jordan Lyles and the Kansas City Royals. And again, it's pretty much the same blueprint, like you mentioned, that we talked about on the Friday pod, just back in the Twins, probably this entire weekend against this Royals team. So 1 + 1 = 2. Don't want to fade that. Definitely agree with you on the Twins here. And again, this is an opportunity for them to kind of keep pace with the Guardians, who are playing the other the AL Central team in the Chicago White Sox, which leads me to my lock for the Saturday games. And I'm going to go with the other AL Central team. That's going to be the Cleveland Guardians on the run line here. I do see a minus 140 money line price on the Guardians, but I'm simply going to take Logan Allen here and back him against the Chicago White Sox, who are blowing up this team right now, at least their pitching rotation. We'll touch on that here in a minute. But the Guardians, they're hot right now. They're playing some good baseball. That bats have starting to come around a little bit. I know they traded away Rosario, but this team is in second place in the AL Central, right behind the Minnesota Twins, who have a 1.5 game lead. And again, this is an opportunity for the Guardians to pick up these wins against the against one of the worst teams in the division. Like I mentioned, that they are blowing up. They did get the victory on Thursday night against the White Sox 6-3. Again, I think it's going to be an opportunity for them to continue piling up these wins. Logan Allen hasn't lost a start on the road for this Cleveland Guardians team since back on April 30th against the Boston Red Sox. Since then, a 3-1 victory against the Chicago White Sox, which was in May, 5-0 victory against the Orioles in May, and then fast forward to June, 4-2 victory against the Twins, 8-6 against the Padres, 14-1 against the Royals, and then again in July, on July 18th, 10-1 victory against the Pirates. Each of those victories have come by at least 2 earned runs. So I like the minus 140 price on the money line, but I think that you'll get a better plus price on the run line with Logan Allen behind the Guardians. So I'm going to take the Guardians minus 1.5 when that line does come out.
Yeah, I think the Guardians have been the better team so far, but you mentioned Logan Allen and how well he's pitched lately. The White Sox are in the middle of blowing up the entire team. So that is definitely a sign of maybe them being weaker on both sides. I know they've traded away a couple of pitchers. I'm not going to tell you that all the players in the lineup are still going to be there in the next day or two. We'll see what happens there, but you might also get to fade a potentially compromised team offensively if the White Sox continue blowing up the entire roster and trade the likes of Tim Anderson or somebody, maybe Jake Berger, somebody.
Yeah, I think that they're, again, this is a good transition over to the trade deadline. We'll get here in a minute. I mean, we saw they trade away Lucas Giolito. We saw the trade earlier of Lance Lynn. Not sure how much that actually helps the Dodgers. Maybe a change of scenery helps Lance Lynn. They also got Joe Kelly back to the Dodgers. I'll touch on those trades here in a minute after I tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy. Look, the football season and the NFL season is right around the corner, and Underdog Pick'em is a great way to get down on a ton of NFL player props. It's available in a ton of markets, plus plenty of opportunities to win in their daily MLB contest. And of course, make sure to enter Best Ball Mania 4, where first place gets $3 million. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure to use that promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus of up to $100. Again, that's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure to use that promo code SGPN. All right, Scott, I know we just talked about the White Sox, a team that is pretty much blowing up their pitching rotation. I think that's a great transition. First, I got to get you guys caught up on some of the trades that have transpired in the MLB over the past 48 hours. We had a couple trades happen on Friday as well, but right with this White Sox team here, Scott, we talked about Lucas Giolito getting traded over to the Angels. Not sure how much that moves the needle. I think it does give, if Giolito is able to find some type of form from the last couple of seasons. Not saying that he has to be a Cy Young, but he can be a solid number 2 pitcher for the Angels. That's only going to help Ohtani as their ace trying to make that playoff push. So the first trade that went down was the White Sox trading Lucas Giolito to the Angels. And then we saw on Friday that Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly were headed to the Dodgers in exchange for some prospects led by Trace Thompson, the brother of Klay Thompson, over to the White Sox. Any immediate reactions on that? I know Lance Lynn hasn't had a great season at all for the White Sox, but maybe the change of scenery here, going to a Dodgers team that, is leading the NL West right now, is a contender for the World Series title. Any thoughts on either of those two moves for the White Sox?
Yeah, the White Sox, I don't mind. It's about time they started blowing up the core. People have been asking them to blow up the core for years, and then they had the one flukish season under La Russa where they made the playoffs and lost immediately, and that's how that went. But they've been kind of irrelevant since they won the World Series back in 2005, so they haven't really done much. But when you're looking at the other trades that I think are worth talking about, first of all, I like the very small move Milwaukee made. I like getting Carlos Santana. I like getting a switch hitter there, a veteran who can help at the first base position. I like that move. They didn't really give up much for him, so that's one thing I wanted to mention. Milwaukee, I guess they're buying. There were some questions if they were going to sell off, but getting Santana for basically nothing, I think is a pretty good deal since he is a switch and he does play first base and he's a very patient hitter who could help a little bit with that lineup. So that was one small move I wanted to mention. I want to talk about the Dodgers because you just brought them up, but I was going to talk about them anyway. I don't know what the hell they're doing because they traded for a bunch of players I don't like. I'm just being straightforward. Now, some of it's going to sound extremely biased because it's players that I don't think are very good. Lance Lynn has had moments. I think we'd all agree that he can strike out a lot of guys, also gives up a lot of contact and a lot of home runs, and he has not exactly been that effective this year. So Lance Lynn, hit or miss on. We'll start there. I understand the desire to try to acquire, I guess, a hitting shortstop in in Rosario, but I'm not a big Rosario guy. Defensively, he's the worst shortstop in the entire league, so I don't really understand that move either, unless the argument is he's just really good against lefties and you want to platoon him, but still, I don't think he's a great overall shortstop. I don't mind Kiki. I think he's fine. I think you watched him more than I did, but I think he's okay. It's a reunion for him. He was pretty decent the first go around. I remember he was particularly good in that against the Cubs in one of those series, but still, I just don't really think the Dodgers did much. It looks like they made some big all-in decisions where they're trying to make a serious push to win a title, and I don't really think any of the moves help push them over the edge. And don't even get me started on Joe Kelly. Like, I'm not even going to bother on Joe Kelly. I can't believe after giving up the grand slam to Kendrick in Game 5 of the NLDS, they brought him back. I can't believe that Kelly's still, I guess, desirable from the Dodgers after that whole thing unfolded. But I don't really understand what the Dodgers are doing. Kiki's a really bad defensive shortstop or defensive infielder. You're looking at Rosario, really bad defensive infielder. You're looking at Lance Lynn, who once again has some moments, but for the most part, he's kind of streaky, and I'm being generous when I say it that way. Do you really understand what the Dodgers are doing? Because I feel like they were trying to make a push, kinda, without giving up much, but I really don't like the players they got back, and I don't think they move the needle at all.
Well, they're getting the band back together that won them that title in the shortened season. I think that's what it is.
They need a neutral. They need a neutral field to play on with a 60-game season, and maybe they'll win a title. But you know, do you like their moves?
It feels like
I don't get it.
Yeah, it feels like they're reaching a little bit, right? I didn't mind the Kike move, and again, For the Red Sox, it was because they got Trevor Story back. So I mean, at that point, Kike became expendable, and Dodgers
Kiki
picked
was
him up.
like okay. Like I
Yeah,
don't think he's that bad of a player. Rosario though defensively is a mess.
yeah,
It's just a matter of that combination. I
yeah,
don't get why you would get Kiki and Rosario
right, yeah,
to platoon shortstop when neither of them can field properly at shortstop. Like that
yeah,
doesn't make any sense.
yeah. And then again, the Lance Lynn move, Lance Lynn move doesn't make sense to me either. I think there was definitely better pitchers out there that you could have traded for to add to your rotation, because I know the pitching rotation hasn't been the greatest for the Dodgers. Then they've been dealing with a lot of injuries as well there, right? I know we talked about Walker Buehler at the beginning of the season, missing the entire year with the injury. They lost Dustin May again as well. It's really been led by Clayton Kershaw, and Julio Urias, since returning, hasn't been very good either. I know he had a great, season last year, but he's been really up and down this year. More down than up has been Julio Urias. Maybe there are more moves coming for the Dodgers, but really didn't understand. Yeah, I agree with you. Only one that kind of did make sense to me was the Kike move. So
Well,
we'll
I'm
see
gonna
if
ask
it,
why do you like the Kiki move? I know that he's fine.
I
And
think he's
it's a reunion,
versatile.
but
He,
okay.
he'll give them he gives them, he's a utility guy, right? He can play multiple positions. I mean, I'm not yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest move, but I think it's the best move that they made out of the ones that they've traded for, which kind of tells you how bad some of the moves have been made by the Dodgers. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with the Dodgers. I know, we talked about the White Sox blowing it up, but I mean, maybe there's more moves coming for the Dodgers. I'm not sure, Scott.
I'm not sure. I know the Dodgers are always an aggressive team at the deadline.
Yeah.
They've done some risky moves that have paid off. Pujols was actually good for them, as crazy as that sounds, because he was kind of useless for a couple of years before that, and the Dodgers revived his career. Then again, they tried out Joey Gallo. That didn't work out at all. They've been kind of swinging for the fences on a couple of guys.
Yeah.
They really do like to have lefty specialists in terms of righty batters. They like to try to find guys that specialize against lefty pitching. And I guess that's where Rosario's going to come in. But once again, it just feels like a lot of moves to apply duct tape to a torn ACL. Like, I don't think it really is going to fix anything. They added some veterans and maybe some playoff experience, but it really just feels like they're rearranging deck chairs. Like, the problems on this team are not going to get rectified by the moves that they made. And I don't think that any of the moves made them a fully better team. Do you? I mean, the argument, I guess, for Lynn, he's better than Michael Grove.
Yeah.
Like, that's the argument you got going for you, but I don't trust a Lynn in a playoff game. I'm not sure you trust a Lynn in a playoff game. So then what are we doing here?
Yeah, I don't get it either. Some of the other moves, the Astros reacquired, I guess I can should say, Kendall Graveman from a couple seasons ago to add to their bullpen. Let's see, what else did we have? That was pretty much it.
Do you like the Santana move, or do you think I'm overreacting?
No, that's a good move. I've talked about for several years now that the Brewers just need to get a competent offense because they have a great pitching rotation. I know when their guys are healthy, with Corbin Burns, when Brandon Woodruff is healthy, Freddie Peralta is starting to trend in the right direction. Their bullpen has always been solid. It's just been that they haven't been able to score enough runs. They're kind of the Tampa Bay Rays of the National League, right? Where pitching is good, but the offense is just not good enough. And Christian Yelich hasn't been that same player for the Brewers since he won that MVP. But I definitely do think that they need to make some more moves and get the batting order some help behind Christian Yelich and some of the other guys that they do have. But yeah, Santana, I don't hate them for what they gave up, which is next to nothing. It's only going to help him. I want to say, didn't he play for the Brewers before?
I'm trying to remember. It feels like he would have, but I'm pretty sure he didn't. I want to check.
Let me see here. I feel like he did because let me see. I could be wrong. I know he played for the Twins. Let's see here.
He was on the Guardians.
Okay, no, yeah. So he's on the Royals. Yes, I was wrong about that.
Yeah, I didn't think he was on the Brewers.
Yeah, so he played for the Guardians, the Phillies for 1 year. He went back to the Guardians, the Royals, the Mariners. Last season he got traded. Had a stint with the Blue Jays and then the Pirates. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's a good move for them. Like you mentioned, he's a switch hitter. Gives them some first base depth as well. A little bit of home run power as well that the Brewers can always use as well. So don't hate it for the Brewers. Anything else that's kind of stuck out to you? I know Aaron Judge. I know not trade related, but he's back for the Yankees. Maybe a little too late there, Scott.
Well, the Yankees said they're buying, so we'll see what happens because Cashman might get fired if they don't, even though he should have been fired years ago. So we'll see if he actually still has endless job security. There's one move I got to talk about because it was kind of weird that they decided to trade him first. It's got to be the Mets. I mean, you were linked to trading away Scherzer and Verlander, and I know it's going to be a bit trickier to find trade partners for them.
Yeah.
I was not expecting Robertson to be the first person to go.
No, I agree.
But I don't know what you think of that move. They got prospects, which is the first sign of a series of dominoes to fall.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely the tip of the iceberg. But I'm curious with your thoughts on that. They trade away Robertson for prospects. Do you agree with them blowing the team up? Because it appears that's the direction they're heading.
Yeah. I mean, at this point of the season let me see where they are in the standings. I think they were 17-8. Yes, there's 17 games back in the division. Forget the division. Let's take a look at the wild card where the Mets are right now. So in the National League, they are 7 games back of the third spot, which is currently occupied by the Phillies, and the Reds are currently tied for the second and third spot. Giants have a half a game lead. So, and then you have 2 teams right behind them in the Marlins and the Diamondbacks, who are half a game behind. Cubs 4 games back, and the Padres 6.5 games back, and then it is the New York Mets. I think, for the Mets, you got to blow it up. I don't think you're going to win with Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer as your 1-2 punch, especially in the playoffs, because the last couple of years, if you've watched, those 2 pitchers in particular, especially Scherzer, has not been very good in the postseason. I know last year when the Astros won the World Series title, Verlander had 1 bad start, but other than that, he was really solid. And I think that of the 2, I think his name has popped up more about being traded. Another rumor has been back to the Astros because that rotation has also been decimated by injuries this season. I know they lost Luis Garcia. Lance McCullers hasn't been able to stay healthy over the past several seasons, dealing with different type of injuries. So I think that Verlander and the Mets, I think it's time for them to blow it up. I think more so it's going to be something similar to the White Sox, Scott, where they're blowing up the pitching rotation and maybe keeping some of their guys. I don't think will have significant moves from their batting order. Like guys I don't think Pete Alonso or Lindor will be traded. I think it's more so their 2 senior pitchers in Verlander and Scherzer. I think more so Verlander for me that does get moved.
I think both of them are going to probably get moved, but I'm curious what they're going to have to give up. But it just seemed maybe a bit surprising to me that Cohen, who spent so much money on the team, is actually not tripling down, and he actually is trying to encourage a rebuild of sorts.
Yeah.
Usually you don't see that. I mean, you make an argument the Yankees should have done that a couple years ago, but a lot of teams keep trying to chase because they're so invested monetarily speaking that they really can't afford a rebuild. A part of me knew the Mets were going to at least play with the idea of rebuilding, but I figured with Cohen, I don't want to compare him to Ballmer in the NBA, but the Clippers should arguably blow it up. But the argument is Ballmer's got so much money, he doesn't really care. He's just trying to win a championship. I thought maybe Cohen might just keep throwing money at the problem until it fixed itself. I'm actually a little bit impressed he was willing to realize it was a lost cause, and he's starting to sell off the team.
Yeah, I mean, but you take a look at the 2 New York teams right now. I kind of understand why the Yankees do want to be buyers at the trade deadline, because they're only 2.5 games out of a wild card spot right now, right?
And Judge was hurt, so they have an alibi built in.
Yeah, and now you get Judge back on Friday night in the lineup. You're going up against Baltimore, a division opponent, versus where the Mets are right now, 17 games back in the NL East and 7 games back in the wild card. So at the end of the day, you are a businessman like Steve Cohen and Steve Ballmer, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the dollar, the dollar amount as to right, because you're still running a business. So maybe he was advised that hey, it may be time to let the season go, trade away the big contracts that you have with your 2 ace pitchers and see what happens going into the off season and next season, because again, like the Toronto Blue Jays of a couple seasons ago, they made all these roster moves for them to go out and try to win a championship. Obviously, Toronto didn't spend as much money as the Mets have this past offseason, but I think it was very curious that the first domino to fall was David Robertson to the Marlins for this Mets team. So it's going to be a very interesting trade deadline. I think it's going to be very active, Scott, but Do you think also Dylan Cease gets moved by the White Sox because they've already let go of Giolito and Lynn?
Well, he lost me money yesterday, but I think the White Sox should trade him immediately. I don't think the more that I thought about it and the more that I actually looked at his numbers, I don't think Dylan Cease is as good as people say he is. Like I think he had one very good year last year where his ERA was like 2.2.
Yeah.
But you look at every other year that he's had, his ERA is like mid threes or low fours. Like I am wondering if last year was a total fluke or not. Because watching him pitch, I understand that his stuff is good. He hangs a lot of pitches, and I am kind of wondering if you might agree with me there. Cease might fetch you a decent trade package,
Yeah.
but if you actually dig deeper, I think it's extremely overrated.
Yeah, I mean, I think that more so about Dylan Cease is that he's just been a high strikeout pitcher, right? It's
Yeah.
either strikeouts or it's going over the fence. And last year, you're right, that 14 and 8, 2.20 ERA, Cy Young caliber year if it wasn't for what Justin Verlander did coming back from the injury that he suffered and just being absolutely lights out for the Astros. But yeah, I mean, prior to that, 13 and 7, 2021, a 3.91 ERA. Prior to that, 4.01 in the COVID shortened year. In his first season, 4 and 7 with a 5.79 ERA. So maybe is again, I think for a lot of these pitchers, sometimes it's about just a scenery change and just getting the proper coaching. I do think that Cease has the potential, but again, this season it's been a lot about his location and his command just hasn't been there for him. But we know that he's always up there in getting the strikeouts, right? Like this season, he has 143 strikeouts compared to about 49 walks this season, but over the last 5 games, he just hasn't been very good. The walks are significantly higher over his last 5 games, where he's allowed 10 walks to only 33 strikeouts. So I think that he will definitely be on the move. I know he was linked to the Astros. Him and even Lewis Roberts were crazily linked to the Astros. But I think the 2 names for the Astros are going to be Verlander and Cease. We'll see if they do pull the trigger on one of those 2 pitchers because they do need some rotation help there. Angels, I want to touch on the Angels here before we get out of here. They've won, like we mentioned, they've won, I think, 6 or 7 or 7 or 8. They're making a push for the wild card spot. They're sitting 3 games out. I know when we did the second half preview and we talked about it earlier this week, I know somebody asked in our chat if Angels to make the playoffs was a viable bet. I've wasted money in worse trades. I did get down on them at a plus 715 price to make the playoffs.
When
and
did
it's
you
only
take
because,
that? When did you take that?
That was prior to the doubleheader yesterday.
Oh, okay.
It was on DraftKings around 7-1. Then I found another spot at plus 715.
Okay.
So, and I know they do have a tough schedule coming up. I think this series this weekend against the Blue Jays is going to be huge because the Blue Jays right now hold that 3rd spot in the wild card, and the Boston Red Sox are 1.5 games back. The Yankees are 2.5 back, and the Angels are 3 games back. I know you mentioned that you don't think the Angels are going to make the playoffs, but what other moves do you think they have to make? I think it's the pitching rotation more so they need another pitcher, but are you buying the stock right now after what's kind of transpired and them saying they're going to keep Ohtani, or do you still think it's a fluke right now of what they've been able to do because they've beat up on lesser competition?
Oh, they have, but it's not their problem. I mean, they have to take care of business on the schedule. They were able to sweep Detroit. They won 2 out of 3 against the Pirates, and they swept the Yankees. So definitely a nice run for them. Pretty important set over the weekend against the Blue Jays because they might be a team they're competing with in the wild card race. So we'll see what happens there. Then they play Atlanta on the road, which is not a fun time, but Atlanta's kind of just playing out the string at this point. So maybe they can take a couple there. Then they play a 4-game set against Seattle and a 3-game set against San Francisco. After that, they have a pretty serious gauntlet because you have Houston, Texas, and Tampa for 9 games, which is going to be a bit difficult. But once again, I don't think they're going to make it. But if you want to talk about value, at 7-1, I'm not going to criticize you for it, knowing for sure Ohtani's not getting traded. Because that was always the scary thought in the back of people's minds. I don't want to invest in either, for example, the Angels to make the playoffs or even Ohtani MVP because you thought, maybe he'll get traded halfway through the year. And now it turns out he's not going to. I do think when you're looking at the actual spot for the Angels, it's a good investment spot because I do think they might drop to like 4-1 at some point.
Yeah.
I still don't think they're going to get in. But once again, at 7-1, there are definitely worse long shots to take at that price.
Let me see what the updated number is here for the
Did they gain much
Angels.
ground? Because I know that they played 2 games against Detroit, but I don't know if they actually gained that much ground.
They're down to 5-1 now.
Okay. I mean, you already got value on it for now, but 5-1. I mean, what do you say they were out? They were 3 games out?
3 games out of the third spot in the wild card.
Once again, you're in striking distance at 5-1.
Yeah, so they're trailing only the 2 AL East teams, or 3 AL East teams, I should say. The Blue Jays hold that spot right now, the third spot, and then it's the Red Sox and the Yankees that are behind the Blue Jays, and then the Angels 3 games back, Mariners 4.5 games back. So again, this is a big series for the Angels this weekend. Like we talked about, the Angels and Blue Jays are going head to head. They're able to close the gap here. I mean, let's just say they take 2 out of 3 from them, they close another game. I don't know. And again, I want to say this as well. Are we for sure that the Tampa Bay Rays make the playoffs?
You make a discussion that they might not, but the point is that's another team you could in theory leapfrog, but it's going to be tricky. That whole race is going to be nuts in the final couple weeks, and you're hoping the Angels are there, but the fact is they've at least shown a desire to go for it. So if you want to make an argument on what you're looking for teams that are going to buy, and the Angels are already buying. I still think that their main piece they need is bullpen help, because I really don't like their bullpen at all. So their closer's fine, but they really overachieve with the bullpen for most of the year. And I do think they could use some extra pieces there. I think Tampa at the end of the year is going to get in. I think they'll find a way to get through, but it's going to be close for a lot of teams. That's really the tricky part for the Angels. It's because you're not just competing with those 3 teams. There's a couple other teams that are lingering. So there might be 5 or 6 teams in the race for like 3 spots. But once again, it's 7-1 or 5-1. You are assuming Trout's coming back. You still have Ohtani that's healthy. They're buying players at the deadline. There are some good signs there for a long shot to take a flyer on.
Yeah. Any other teams or players you think that need to make a move or will be on the move as far as the trade deadline goes?
Well, it's mostly just waiting for the bottom feeders to trade half their team. I'm trying to think of teams that have really made any move so far. We saw Pittsburgh make a trade. They're going to make a couple more. I would not be shocked if Keller was shipped off too. We'll see what happens. The Nationals, as far as I know, haven't done anything. The Rockies haven't done anything. The A's, I don't think, have done anything. And I'm just waiting for all those teams to sell half their players.
Yeah.
Are you waiting for a team? I know it's a cop-out answer, but I was expecting, maybe the Cubs trade Bellinger, but I doubt it because they're back to 500 now, so maybe they can make a push. But it's really just waiting to see which playoff teams or borderline playoff teams are going to try to pick off some good pieces from really bad teams over the next couple of days.
Yeah, I think names like big names, we're talking about big names, like we mentioned Juan Soto, right? He's been linked to trades over this past week. We heard about Nolan Arenado potentially getting moved as well. I think the Cardinals are now pretty much doomed. They're 10 games out of a wild card spot in the National League. So those are the bottom dwelling teams this season. Again, you can pick off some of those players, like I just mentioned with Juan Soto, with Nolan Arenado. I know the Yankees, I think, and Arenado were linked. We talked about that last week, I believe.
The Yankees are linked to everybody.
Yeah,
I saw rumors the Yankees were linked to Seth Brown. I'm like, what is happening? Like, pick a lane. Either go for the ridiculously underwhelming, like pinch hit guy, platoon guy, or go for Arenado. But I don't need the Yankees linked to every player on the market.
One name that I always look for at the trade deadline that I think should get traded and it would be a big help has been Salvador Perez. And I'm not sure why he hasn't requested a trade or wants to be traded or whatever the case might be. But
isn't his contract like pretty bad for a guy that can barely play catcher anymore?
Yeah, let me see what it is. But
they gave him an extension a couple of years ago when he had 40 plus home runs.
Yeah, but I still feel like even if he doesn't turn into be a catcher, I think he could still like hit home runs. I mean, his batting average hasn't been too bad, but
I take him if I was Houston. I think Maldonado sucks.
Yeah, I think that's a great spot for him. He's making $13 million a year.
Okay, that's actually not that bad.
So I'm sorry, no. So he earned $18 million in 2022. He will earn an estimated around $20 million for this season and then next season, and then 2025, he's going to earn $22 million.
That's the problem. because it goes to 2025.
Yeah.
That's why he's still on a team.
Yeah, and then he has a final year with a club option salary of $13.5 million for the 2026 season. He's only 30.
I didn't mention the Royals. They should also trade half their team.
Yeah.
Besides like, Bobby Witt Jr. and a couple of exceptions, but there's a lot of bad teams that should basically have everybody for sale.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know why I thought that he was a lot older than he is right now. I mean, he's 33, but I don't know why I feel like he was like 35 plus.
Because he's got catcher knees. He can't play catcher anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
the same reason why Mauer at the last stage of his career, you thought he was 40 because he could barely play first base because his knees were shot. Like, it just happens that way. Catchers age very, very quickly.
Insano asking if the Cubs are still dealing their pitching.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I would personally hang on to Justin Steele because he's having a Cy Young caliber year. He could be a frontline starter.
He's falling off a cliff.
Yeah. He might be the guy that might be on the move. He could be a solid number 3 guy for a team that needs pitching. I mean, we mentioned several teams that can use pitching right now, looking to contender for either a division spot or division title or a wild card spot. So, yeah, I think a lot still to be determined. I would have your notifications on if you're a true baseball fan and see what kind of trend inspires as we approach the trade deadline. Anything significant that does happen, maybe we'll do like a bonus episode for the trade deadline. Let me see when it's actual. It's August 1st. So what's that, on Monday is the actual day? Yeah. So, yeah, definitely excited about the trade deadline. Scott, anything else you want to mention before we get out of here?
Not really. I spent about 45 minutes trying to think of one player who played for the Rockies and the Reds for the grid, and I finally got one. So there we go.
Oh, Rockies and the Reds. Oh, I can tell you that right now.
I thought it was pretty tough.
Moustakas.
Yeah, I once again, I just was trying to think of somebody a little bit more obscure. I settled on Tony Womack. 0.4% for the rarity score. 0.4.
Oh, there you go.
So there you go.
All right, let's recap our picks here real quickly before we get out of here. So for my lock, I had the Cleveland Guardians, either money line or run line. I'm probably going to be more so on the run line with Logan Allen on the mound. I know the White Sox don't have a starting pitcher announced yet, but I don't care who it is because this team is pretty much in the midst of blowing it up, and I think the Guardians will take advantage of that with Logan Allen, who hasn't lost a road start since the month of April for this Guardians team. My dog is the Astros run line -1.5 at +135, and then my total is going to be the Reds and Dodgers over 10 runs with Luke Weaver and Emmett Shaheen on the mound here. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, so my lock's going to be the Twins -1.5 against the Royals at -115. My dog's going to be the Rangers at an absurd +152 price on the money line, and my total will be the Angels' first 5 team total over 2.5, fading Manoah.
All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the MLB Gambling Podcast. We will be back in some form or fashion, same time on Sunday to handicap the Monday games. Good reminder to check out our picks over the course of the weekend over on the website, sportsgamblingpodcast.com. Just hit that MLB tab, hit the MLB Picks tab. You'll see our picks all throughout the weekend. Like I mentioned, the podcast will reconvene as regularly on Sunday evening for the Monday games heading into the first day of August and the MLB trade deadline. Make sure to follow Scott on Twitter at Reichel Radio. You can follow me on Twitter at SportsNerd824. Make sure to follow the MLB Gambling Podcast account on Twitter at MLB SGPN. And we're also on Instagram, MLB Gambling Podcast. Make sure to follow us there as well. If you haven't already left us a rating and review, please go ahead and do so. Definitely do appreciate if you guys can do that for us. Good luck with your picks this weekend. Let's break these books off and let it ride.